Three little girls stood in a hospital waiting room whispering to a stranger, a man they had never met before in their lives. He was sitting completely alone, staring at his hands, and they could see something was very wrong. The oldest one leaned in close and said quietly, "Pretend you're our father." He looked up, and what happened in the next few hours changed every single one of them forever. If stories like this one move you the way they move us, we'd love for you to subscribe to Sage Stories. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it today, and drop a comment below as we read every single one. His name was Marcus and he was 41 years old, and he had not slept more than 3 hours in the past 2 nights. He sat in a hard plastic chair in the waiting area of St. Catherine's Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio, wearing a gray hoodie that still had a small smear of dried paint on the sleeve. From the weekend, he and his daughter Lily had repainted her bedroom together. Pale lavender, her choice. She had laughed the whole afternoon, and he had laughed with her. And now he sat alone in a hospital waiting room trying not to fall apart. Lily was 9. She had started complaining about headaches 3 weeks ago. At first, Marcus thought it was eye strain from too much screen time. Something easy, something fixable. He got her glasses. The headaches kept coming. Then one morning she woke up and couldn't walk in a straight line, bumping into the door frame on her way to the bathroom, and something cold moved through Marcus's chest that he hadn't felt since the night his wife, Dana, died of a brain aneurysm 6 years earlier. He had Lily at the emergency room before the sun was fully up. The doctors ran tests, then more tests. Then they used a word Marcus had been trying not to think about for the past 48 hours, a word that sat at the back of his throat like something he couldn't swallow. They were waiting on results. The neurologist had told him it could take most of the day. Marcus had called his mother, but she lived in Phoenix and couldn't get a flight until tomorrow morning. He had called his neighbor Linda, who was watching Lily's hamster and had offered to come sit with him, but he told her no, he was fine, he was okay. He just needed some quiet. He wasn't fine. He wasn't okay. He sat in that plastic chair and stared at his hands and tried to remember how to breathe. The waiting room was the kind of place that strips away all pretense. Fluorescent lights, the hum of a vending machine, a television mounted high on the wall playing a cable news channel with the volume too low to hear. There were maybe a dozen other people scattered around the room, each one carrying their own invisible weight. Marcus barely noticed any of them. He noticed the girls. It would have been hard not to. 3 of them, clearly identical, somewhere around 7 or 8 years old, with matching dark braids and bright yellow sneakers, and an energy that seemed almost defiant against the heaviness of the room. They were sitting with a woman Marcus assumed was their grandmother, a small, tired-looking woman with silver hair who had fallen, asleep sitting upright in her chair, with her purse clutched in her lap. The girls were doing their absolute best to be quiet, which mostly meant whispering loudly and elbowing each other and trying not to giggle. Marcus watched them for a moment, and for just a second, something in his chest loosened slightly. Then his phone buzzed. It was a news alert, something meaningless, and the sight of no new messages from the hospital hit him all over again like a wave. He dropped his head into his hands. He didn't hear them approach. He just suddenly became aware of small sneakers on the linoleum in front of him, and he looked up to find all 3 girls standing there, shoulder to shoulder, studying him with serious dark eyes. The tallest one, who he would later learn was named Camille and was 4 minutes older than her sisters, spoke first. She said it softly, like she was sharing a secret. "Mister, are you okay? You look like you're really sad." Marcus opened his mouth to say what adults always say, that he was fine, that everything was fine, but nothing came out. He just looked at this little girl, and she looked back at him, and he shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "I'm not really okay right now." The 3 of them seemed to consult each other through some private language of glances. Then Camille leaned in even closer and said, "Our daddy isn't here and our grandma is sleeping and we're not supposed to talk to strangers. But you look like you really need someone." She paused. "So maybe pretend you're our father. Then we're allowed." Marcus stared at her. A sound came out of him that was somewhere between a laugh and something else entirely. He said, "That is the most creative solution I have ever heard." Camille nodded like this was simply logical. "I'm Camille. That's Deja and that's Simone." The other 2 gave little waves. "Our dad is in surgery. It's been a long time. Marcus felt the air shift around him. He looked at these three small girls who were carrying something just as heavy as he was, and somehow carrying it with this extraordinary matter-of-fact courage. And he said, "My daughter is upstairs. They're running some tests on her brain. I'm waiting to find out if she's going to be okay." The one named Deja, the smallest of the three, reached out and patted his hand twice, very deliberately, the way a child does when they've seen adults comfort each other and are trying it out themselves. She said, "We'll wait with you." And they did. For the next 2 hours, Marcus sat in that waiting room with Camille, Deja, and Simone. They told him about their dad, whose name was Robert and who was a, firefighter and who had been hurt pulling someone out of a burning building. They told him he was brave, and Marcus agreed that yes, he absolutely was. They showed Marcus drawings they'd made on the backs of hospital pamphlets, wobbly houses, stick figures, a dog they didn't own but wanted. Simone fell asleep leaning against his arm at some point, and Marcus sat very still so he wouldn't wake her. Camille asked him about Lily, and Marcus found himself talking about her in a way he hadn't been able to with any adult. He talked about the lavender bedroom. He talked about the way Lily made up songs about whatever she was doing, narrating her own life in made-up melodies while she got ready for school. He talked about how she laughed with her whole face. Camille listened with complete attention and said, "She sounds like the best." Marcus said, "She really is." When the neurologist finally came to find him, Marcus stood up so fast he nearly knocked over his chair. The doctor's face was calm and measured, and he spoke carefully. The results showed a benign cyst, not a tumor. Not what they had feared. Manageable, treatable. Lily was going to be okay. Marcus sat back down. He put his face in his hands again, but this time it was different. His shoulders shook. Deja, who had woken up at the commotion, patted his back the same way she'd patted his hand. Camille said very quietly, "Good news?" He nodded. He couldn't speak for a moment. He just nodded. About 20 minutes later, a nurse came to find the girls. Their father was out of surgery. He was awake. He was asking for them. All three leaped to their feet at once. And then Camille stopped and turned back and hugged Marcus quickly, fiercely, the way kids hug when they mean it completely. She said, "I'm glad your daughter's going to be okay." He hugged her back and said, "I'm glad your dad's awake." Deja waved. Simone blew him a kiss, and then they were gone, running down the corridor toward their father, their yellow sneakers bright under the fluorescent lights. Marcus sat alone again in the waiting room, but it was entirely different now. He thought about three little girls who were scared and waiting, just like him, but who had looked across a room and seen someone sadder than they were and decided to do something about it. They had no strategy, no plan, just an open heart and a very practical solution. If we're not supposed to talk to strangers, let's make him not a stranger. He went upstairs to see Lily 30 minutes later. She was sitting up in her hospital bed, still a little groggy, and when she saw his face, she said, "Daddy, why are you crying?" He climbed into the chair beside her bed and took her hand and said, "Because I missed you, and because something really good happened today." There is something profound in what those three girls did. They were children carrying real fear, sitting in one of the hardest places a child can sit. And they still looked outward. They still chose connection over comfort. They saw a man alone and decided simply that he shouldn't be. We spend so much of our lives waiting for the right moment, the right words, the right circumstances to reach out to someone who is struggling. But sometimes all it takes is crossing the room. Sometimes all it takes is sitting down beside someone and saying, "Without any complication at all, I see you. And you don't have to be alone right now." If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need it today. And we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell us about a time a stranger's small kindness held you together when you needed it most. Those stories matter. You matter. And every single act of kindness, no matter how small it seems, ripples further than you will ever know.